of Orthodox spirituality.
Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.
Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy.
Hello, dear listeners. We are continuing to read from the book With Pain and Love for Contemporary Man, the first volume in the series Spiritual Counsels by Saint Paisios. Don't touch the children. Yeroda, what will become of so many children who grow up today without discipline? For them, there will be mitigating circumstances. Their condition is the fault of their parents who never understood the nature of discipline. They give children such excessive freedoms that they turn them into little hooligans. You say one word to them and they respond with 5, and with such impudence. One day they may even turn into criminals. Where are the rules, boundary lines, and expectations for guiding children today? Parents give their children too much freedom and too little discipline, and this destroys them. Our society tells parents, don't touch the children. And of course, our children then think, where are we going to find a better system than this? In other words, our society is deliberately turning them into little rebels who do not want to listen to their parents, their teachers, or anyone else. This serves some people's designs perfectly, for if children are not taught from a young age to be rebellious, how will they be able to destroy everything later when they grow up? And you can actually see it on their faces. Poor children, they have a demonized look about them. If we monastics cannot make good use of freedom in our spiritual lives, what is one to expect of people who live in the world? What good is freedom when it is abused? It will lead to catastrophe. This is why the Greek state is heading in the wrong direction. Can people today make good use of freedom given to them? Freedom must serve real, true progress. Combined with secular progress, this sinful freedom has given rise to spiritual slavery. We are truly free in the spiritual sense when we obey the will of God. But you see, whereas it is obedience that gives us true freedom, the evil one works the opposite way, presenting obedience as enslavement. Thus, our youth, who have been poisoned by the spirit of rebellion, reject obedience. It is understandable that young people are tired of the various ideologies of the 20th century. These systems have brought so much distortion to God's beautiful creation and filled His creatures with anxiety, separating them from Him, the only source of true joy. Do you know what we went through when we were discharged from the army? If we had been at all like today's youth, we would have gone on a rampage and destroyed everything in our way. It was 1950. The guerrilla war was over, and many classes of recruits were being simultaneously discharged from the army. Some of us had been at war for 4.5 years, others for 4, others for 3.5. Exhausted, we arrived in Larissa and headed for the transit centers, only to find them full. So we tried some hotels, but they would not accept us. Soldiers, they must have thought. If they lodge here, not a single blanket will be left clean. It was not as if we did not have money to pay for the rooms. We did. It was March and very cold. Fortunately, an officer saved us, God bless him. He went and found out the train schedules in their maneuvers and arranged for us to spend the night inside the train cars. They will do maneuvers throughout the night, he told us, but don't be afraid, the trains will depart at this or that time in the morning. And indeed, the trains were moving around all night long, but they left as scheduled in the morning. Finally, we got to Thessaloniki. This was the home for some soldiers, and so they left. The rest of us went to the transit centers, but here too they were full. Next we tried the hotels, but no luck. I pleaded with them at the hotel, "Please give me a chair to sit on, and I will pay double the rate of a room." "Sorry, we can't do that," they replied. They were afraid that someone might see me and turn them in for not giving a soldier a room. I spent the whole night outside with other soldiers, standing up and leaning against the walls. Everywhere you looked, the pavements were full of soldiers, as if we had had a parade. If today's youth had been in our place, they would have burned Larissa, Thessaly, and the entire province of Macedonia to the ground. Although they faced no difficulties compared to those we had, today's youth still destroys property. It was so different back then. All those poor soldiers, having suffered through the invasions, the disasters, certainly felt bitter having to endure this hard treatment at the hands of their own countrymen. But it never crossed their minds to do anything bad. They had been through so many hardships in the snow. Many had been wounded and crippled in the war. They had sacrificed so much, and now they had to sleep out on the street. This was how their countrymen were saying thank you. I can't help comparing today's youth with the young men I knew then. In the 50 years that have gone by, the world has changed so much. Today's youth are like a calf that is tied to a stake in a meadow that constantly kicks and yanks on the rope, pulls out the stake, runs off, gets all tangled up, and finally is devoured by beasts. When a child is young, it helps to apply the brake. When you see, for example, a mischievous young boy climbing a wall where he may fall and hurt himself badly, you shout, "No, no." Give him a slap or two and explain the danger. Next time, he will be careful, not because he's afraid of the danger, but because he's afraid of being slapped. Today, no punishments are given out at schools or even in the army. This is why young people are such a menace to their parents and their country. In the army, in the old days, the tougher the basic training was, the greater the bravery the soldiers would show in battle. A young person needs a spiritual guide, someone to advise him and be eager to listen to his concerns in order to proceed with spiritual safety, avoiding dangers, fears, and all kinds of dead ends. All of us, as we grow older, acquire experience from our own lives and from the lives of others, but a young person lacks this experience. This is why an older person can help inexperienced youth avoid blunders. When young people refuse to take advice, they end up experimenting with their own lives. But if they follow the advice given to them, the gain will be theirs. Young men from a Christian organization visited my Kalivi once and were boasting, full of self-confidence, "We don't need anybody, we'll find our own way." Who knows why they said that? Perhaps they had been pressured too much and were rebelling. When they were about to leave, they asked me to point them in the right direction for Iviron Monastery. "Which way should we go?" they asked. "Wait a minute," I told them. "Didn't you boys say that you needed no one, that you will find your own way? Didn't you just say that? If you miss this road, you'll have only a minor inconvenience. At some point you will run into someone, and he will show you the way." But who is going to show you the road to heaven? How will you get there on your own, without a guide? One of them said, "You know, the elder may have a point." Youth must pass the test of purity. A group of women university students came to see me today and told me, "Yeroda, pray so that we may pass our exams." I said, "I will pray that you pass the tests of purity. This is the most important thing. Everything else falls into place after that." It was the right thing to say, wasn't it? There's no greater thing than seeing modesty and purity in the faces of young people today. No greater thing. Sometimes groups of young women, the poor things, so traumatized, come to see me. They live unruly lives with young men and don't realize that the men do not have good intentions, so they get hurt. "What must I do, Father?" they ask. "The tavern owner," I replied, "may have the drunkard as a friend, but he will never accept him as his son-in-law. Stop having relations with them. If they love you, they will appreciate your decision. If they leave you, you will know that they never really loved you, and you will not be wasting your time with them anymore." The devil takes advantage of young people, who, on top of everything else, have to deal with the rebellion of their flesh. He sets out to destroy them during this difficult period of their lives, when the mind is not yet mature. There is little experience and no spiritual reserve. This is why it is important during this critical period that young people seek the advice of their elders, so that they will not slip down the sweet secular slope, which will only fill their souls with anxiety and separate them eternally from God. I know that a physiologically healthy young person cannot easily attain such a spiritual state so that they can discern where there is neither male nor female. Galatians 3, verse 28. This is why the spiritual fathers recommend that young men and women, no matter how spiritual they may be, should not spend time together. At that age, problems will naturally arise, and then temptation will step in and take advantage of their youth. It is better for a young man or a young woman to bear the heavy cross of risking being considered a fool by the opposite sex for his or her spiritual prudence and innocence. This heavy cross hides all the power and wisdom of God, making a young man stronger than Samson and wiser than Solomon. Better that he walk down the street praying than looking left and right, even if he doesn't notice relatives and they misunderstand him and think he has snubbed them by not speaking with them. Otherwise, if he walks looking around with curiosity, he may get in trouble or get misunderstood by lay people who always harbor suspicious thoughts. It's 1,000 times better for a young person to leave church right away after divine liturgy, like a lone animal, and try to keep intact his or her spiritual good sense and whatever else he had learned there, rather than stay around and stare at fancy furs or ties. Doing so causes the enemy to scratch at their heart, which is spiritually agitating. Unfortunately, the world today is so rotten that no matter what path a soul that desires purity may take, it will get soiled. The difference is that God will not make the same demands on a Christian who wishes to remain pure today as those he had made in the past. Purity requires a cool-headed temperament. A young person must use every means to avoid temptations, and Christ will surely come to his assistance. When divine eros is kindled in the heart, it generates so much heat that every other desire and every unseemly picture is burned away. When this fire is burning inside us, we experience pleasure so divine that all other delights pale in comparison. To those who taste heavenly manna, wild carobs are tasteless. This is why we should hold fast to the ship's helm, make the sign of the cross, and have no fear. After every little struggle, heavenly delights follow. If we are brave when temptation comes, God will miraculously come to our assistance. The elder Augustinos told me the following story. When he was a young novice, he lived in a monastery in his native Russia. Most of the fathers there were old, and so he was assigned to one of the monastery employees to help him with fishing, which was the monastery's main means of support. One day, the employee's daughter came and told her father that he must return home where there was an emergency, and she stayed to help in his place. But the poor girl was seized by temptation, and without thinking, she approached the novice with sinful intentions. Antonios, this was his name when he was in the world, was taken aback at this sudden attack. He crossed himself and said, "My Christ, I'd rather drown than sin," and plunged into the deep river. But the good Lord, seeing the heroism of this chaste young man who had acted like Saint Martinianos in order to remain chaste, kept him afloat and completely dry. The biography of Saint Martinianos, we commemorate his name on February 13, mentions that when he was an ascetic living on a rocky outcropping in the sea, a shipwrecked girl approached the rock on a broken timber and begged him to save her from the sea. The saint first pulled her out of the water to safety on his rock, and then, after praying, jumped into the sea himself. By divine providence, dolphins came, took Saint Martinianos on their backs, and carried him to safety ashore. "You see," he explained to me, "I had jumped headfirst into the river, and I still cannot figure out how I found myself standing on the water without even my clothes getting wet." At that moment he had felt an internal peace and inexpressible sweetness that made every sinful thought and carnal desire caused by the indecent gestures of the young woman vanish. When she saw Antonio standing upright on the water, she was overcome by repentance and started weeping, deeply moved by this great miracle. Christ does not require big things from us to help us with our struggle. He expects only a little, a tiny bit. A young man was telling me that he went to Patmos to worship and fell into temptation's trap. A female tourist jumped on him and hugged him while he was walking. He pushed her away, saying, "My Christ, I have come for worship, not for love," and he turned and walked away. That same night in his hotel room, during prayer, he saw Christ immersed in uncreated light. Do you see the reward he received for that one push? Others strive for years in ascetic life and are never blessed with something like that. And he saw Jesus Christ only because he had resisted temptation. This experience naturally made him stronger spiritually. Later on, he saw Saint Marcella, Saint Raphael, and Saint George more than once. One day he came and told me, "Father, say a prayer for me so that I may see Saint George again and be consoled. I cannot find any consolation in this world." Compare this to where other young people end up. A young man with his elderly uncle came to the Kalivi once and told me, "Pray for a young girl who broke her spine in an accident. Her father fell asleep at the wheel, killing himself and injuring her. Let me show you a picture of her." "It's not necessary," I said. He insisted, and they showed me a picture of the girl who was lying down and two men were embracing her. "Who is this young man?" I asked. "A friend," he answered. "Will he marry her?" "No, they are just friends," he replied. "Don't hold it against them, Father," the uncle told me. "That's how young people are today." I will pray, I thought to myself. But she does not just need her spine to be straightened out. Her mind also needs correction, and so does yours, you hopeless man. Whatever happened to respect, his uncle should have told him off, and they were supposedly spiritual people. It is so sad to have spiritual guidance and still be in such a state of spiritual confusion. Even if he intended to marry her, there was no reason for her to be stretched out between the two men, and for this man to be showing the picture to me. It never crossed his mind that what he was doing was wrong. I am not bothered by the picture, but showing it to me is still not right. What sort of family will these young people make? May God help the youth to come to their senses. In the old days, young women would sacrifice everything to keep their chastity. I remember during the war against Italy, the army had drafted some villagers and their animals who were later trapped on a hill by a heavy snowstorm. Beneath the snow-covered spruce trees, the men built shelters using spruce branches to protect themselves from the cold. The women had to seek shelter in the homes of their fellow villagers, people they knew. Two women, one young and one elderly, from a faraway village had to stay in one of these makeshift shelters. But unfortunately, there are always some faithless cowards for whom even war does not make a difference. They have no feelings whatsoever for their fellow human beings who may die or get injured. Given the chance, they will do their best to sin because they are afraid that they may get killed, and they will not have the opportunity to have fun. Danger, at the very least, should make people want to repent. One of these men, who had sin rather than repentance on his mind, was harassing the young woman so much that she was forced to leave the group. She preferred to freeze to death from the cold rather than lose her chastity. When the elderly woman saw that her young companion had left the shelter, she followed her tracks and found her 30 minutes away under the small roof of a chapel dedicated to St. John the Forerunner. Do you see how St. John the Baptist cared about this honorable woman and led her to his chapel, which she never knew existed? Can you guess what else St. John did? He appeared to a soldier in his sleep and told him to go to his chapel as soon as possible. This soldier was in fact Elder Paisios himself. The incident took place during the guerrilla war when the elder was doing his military service. And so the soldier got up in the middle of the snow-lit night and headed to the chapel. He had a rough idea of where it was. When he got there, he saw two women standing in snow up to their knees, blue in the face and frozen from the cold. He immediately opened the chapel, and they all went in and felt better. The soldier had nothing else to offer them, and so he gave his scarf to the old lady and told the woman to share his gloves, so that they could warm first one hand and then the other. The women told him about the temptation they had confronted. "Why," the soldier asked the young woman, "did you decide to leave in the middle of the night with all the snow and walk out into the unknown?" "I did all that I could do for my part," she replied, "and I was convinced that Christ would take care of the rest." The soldier felt compassion for them. With pain and faith, and not just to console them, he said to them with certainty, "Your troubles are over. Tomorrow you will be home." These words made them happy, and they felt even warmer. Sure enough, the battalion of mountain transports opened the road, and in the morning military trucks came, and the poor women were taken home. It is Greek women like these, vested in divine grace, rather than those stripped of clothing and divine grace alike, who deserve our praise and admiration. Later that beast, may God forgive me for this word, told the commander that the helpful soldier had broken the chapel's door and put mules inside. The commander replied, "I do not believe that the man you accuse would do such a thing." In the end, the unrepentant soldier was sent to prison. Young people know when they are truly loved. Yeroda, it seems that those who want to destroy society have seized upon its foundation, its roots, our young people, and have destroyed them. There is no way that they will succeed. It is in the nature of evil to destroy itself. In Russia, after the revolution in 1917, they destroyed everything. But look what is happening now, after 3 generations. God will not allow the destruction of our children, nor will He judge the sins of today's youth as strictly as He will judge the sins of our generation. Yeroda, how is it that some young men and women who lead worldly lives can give very good answers to questions of faith? These young people had good intentions but were not able to apply the brakes on themselves, and they were swept away. This is why they give the right answers. What I mean to say is this. Say that someone wants to follow a particular path in life. He wants to go in a certain direction, but he finds it hard to follow. Still, when he sees someone else who succeeds, he has great respect for him. God will not abandon those who want the good because they have no malice in their hearts. The time will come when they will find the strength to follow the right path. Yeroda, how should we approach young people who have gone astray? Love is the answer. Where there is true and noble love, young people will immediately sense it. It informs them and they become disarmed. Young men who come to my Kalivi come from all walks of life with all kinds of problems. I welcome them, give them a treat. We start a conversation and pretty soon we are friends. They open their hearts to me and accept the love that I give them. Among them are some who are so deprived of love. Poor souls, they are thirsty for it. It is so easy to single out those who have never felt a mother's or father's love. It's as if they cannot get enough. If you care for them, if they sense your love, they forget all their problems, even their drug use. All their suffering disappears. They stop getting in trouble and end up coming to the holy mountain as pious pilgrims. You see, they somehow come to sense God's love, and I see in them such nobility that it breaks my heart. They refuse financial help even though they need it so much, and have a job during the day to make ends meet and go to school at night. They deserve all the help they can get. Near the new train station in Thessaloniki, there are houses where young people, men and women, live together. You can find as many as 15 living in an apartment big enough for 3. Many of them come from broken homes. Some of them steal for their needs, but others have philotimo and cannot steal. For years I have been telling people I know to approach them, to help them. I had asked for a church to be built nearby so that they could gather there. Now they have built a small chapel dedicated to the apostle and deacon Philip, the protector of railway workers. What I have come to realize is that when we are young, if we don't take advantage of the opportunities available to us, the devil will exploit our failure. Don't we have the saying, strike while the iron is hot? When ironsmiths wanted to join 2 pieces of iron together, this was before modern welding, they put the iron in the fire, poured hot water and borax on it, and as soon as they removed it, while it was still spewing sparks, joined it to another piece. It would not work if the iron got cold. It's the same thing with young people. If they remain indifferent when opportunities present themselves, then they will become concerned with other people, to judge them, to criticize them, after which the grace of God is withdrawn. But if he is full of divine fervor, if he is vigilant, he will make much progress. This is why parents should help their children as much as they can while they are still young. Children are like empty cassette tapes. If we fill them with Christ, they will stay close to him forever. If we don't, it will be easier for them to go astray when they become older. But if we give them what they need when they are young, even if they later stray a bit, they will eventually come to their senses. Wood soaked in oil does not rot. Later in their lives, there will be nothing to fear for children that had been soaked in piety with the fear of God. Dear listeners, thank you for listening. Our time is up. We will continue once again where we left off in our next show. Until then, be well.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have
Readings of Orthodox Spirituality.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.
Mercy, Lord, mercy, Lord, mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy.